Well, good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Brian Crombie Radio Hour on Saga 960. I thought to start 2023, it would be really good to check in with Rocco Rossi, who is really an impressive gentleman. He's been involved in politics and business and charitable organizations and a whole bunch of different things. I've had the privilege of interviewing him previously on prostate issues, on heart and stroke issues. He's now president and CEO at the Ontario Chamber of Commerce. What's going on with our economy and business in Ontario is unquestionably a big issue. We're going to talk a little bit about that. We're going to talk a little bit about the Ontario Chamber of Commerce. And Rocco has been posting as well some interesting pictures of treks that he's been doing, pilgrimages that he's been doing across Spain and Europe. And so maybe we'll touch on that as well. Mr. Rossi, welcome to the show, sir.
A great pleasure to be on, Brian. And although it's a little later, Happy New Year to you and your listeners.
Thank you so much. Really appreciate it. So maybe off the top, the Ontario Chamber of Commerce, we're going to talk a little bit about that and boards of trades and chambers of commerce in a couple of minutes. But maybe you can tell me, because you post about this fairly frequently on LinkedIn, what are the big issues that you think that business and frankly, the population of Ontario are facing right now as we start 2023?
Well, we're all facing the inflation issues anytime you fill up with gas or you go to the grocery store, and that has impact on businesses, particularly small and medium-sized businesses that are far less able than the larger organizations to be able to pass on cost increases to their consumers. Before the inflation issue, one of the big issues that's facing our economy is really labor shortages and skill shortages. That was something that was in place prior to the pandemic. It's been accentuated by the pandemic. It will continue after the pandemic. The reality is we are aging as a population. People are retiring, and companies are having great difficulty filling positions. We also have spent a couple of generations really demeaning the role of skilled trades in our economy to our detriment, because these are phenomenal jobs that are desperately needed in the economy and can lead to great middle class and above lifestyles. I mean, when I talked to one of our other members, Ken Hardwick, the CEO of OPG, who is managing a multi-billion-dollar refurbishment of the Darlington nuclear facility, and I ask him what is keeping him up at night. It's, where am I going to get my next welder? Where am I going to get my next electrician? The average welder at Darlington is currently making between $150,000 and $200,000 a year. And the average age of journeyman skilled trades, and you pick the trade from carpentry to plumbing to electrician to boilermakers, is in the high 50s. So there is an enormous issue building that we have to deal with. Clearly, you can't ignore the illegal, unjust invasion of the Ukraine by Russia that has led to massive shocks in energy, on food prices, and that combined with actions that have been taken by the Chinese is leading more and more to a relook at supply chains around the world and the so-called friendshoring or reshoring that we simply can't count on all markets to be able to be reliable sources of supplies, and that is leading to significant changes in where things are manufactured, where people are getting their products. All of these things are going to have an impact longer term on our economy.
That's quite a list. With the inflation issue that you talk about and interest rate increases that are trying to combat that, some people are thinking that that's going to cause recession. Frankly, a lot of people think that that's going to be causing a recession. What's your concern there?
Well, look, yes, there is the traditional fear that as you increase interest rates, and quite frankly, why are they increasing interest rates? It's to try to meet the objective of the central bank, which is to control inflation, because at the end of the day, if prices keep rising at a rate faster than productivity increases and gains in the economy, then that's a debilitating thing for the economy, for workers, for companies in the long run. The problem is a lot of the causes of inflation are not being driven solely on the demand side. There have been enormous supply shocks, COVID being one, the invasion that we've talked about already being another, the lockdowns in China that have caused issues. Those problems are not solved by increasing interest rates, but our ability to go it alone and not increase interest rates when the rest of the developed economies are increasing is something that we can't do, because if you do that, suddenly people start selling Canadian dollars and you get inflation a different way because your currency is depreciated and anything that you buy from abroad will be more expensive.
Well, some of that has happened anyway, even as we've increased interest rates, and the US dollar has appreciated against almost all major currencies, but certainly against the Canadian dollar. How has currency changes impacted business in Ontario?
Well, it's two ways. One, when our dollar goes down, we're actually able to sell our products at a lower price, because if they're priced in Canadian dollars, obviously we benefit from that. The negative is all of our inputs, which are purchased from abroad, and the U.S. is a big source of inputs. It's our number one trading partner. That becomes more expensive, and that drives cost in the economy. It also makes investments in new technology and capital equipment to help improve productivity, make ourselves more competitive, makes those things more difficult, more expensive. So a depreciating currency is not something that you want to see on a systemic basis.
We've got some challenges in 2023, and there's just no question about it. You've gone through a list of some of them. We'll talk about those and others as we go through our conversation this evening. I appreciate you raising them and addressing them. And maybe we can start off after the messages with, what the Chamber does and how you think that you could help businesses in Ontario address these. We're going to take a break for some messages and be back in just 2 minutes with Rocco Rossi, the President and CEO of the Ontario Chamber of Commerce. Stay with us, everybody. Welcome back, everyone, to the Brian Crombie Radio Hour on Saga 960. We're starting off this year, with an interview with Rocco Rossi, the President and Chief Executive Officer of the Ontario Chamber of Commerce. Rocco, you've really had a fascinating career. You've been involved in so many different charitable organizations, business organizations. You've run for politics. How did you end up at the Ontario Chamber of Commerce? Tell me a little bit about that, if you could.
Well, as you know, I started my career, actually, I was looking to become an academic. My mom got ill. I came back from the doctoral program at Princeton and got involved in small family business to help support my family and free up my dad to spend more time with my mom. One thing led to another. I built a business career that ended up turning out reasonably successful. unfortunately, I lost one of my mentors while we were traveling together. I was a senior executive in the beer industry at Labatt Interbrew, and that caused me to reassess things. Long story short, it led me to think more about public service, and went to the Heart and Stroke Foundation. I spent some time, got a cup of coffee in politics, and then with Prostate Cancer Canada, all focused on trying to pass on the incredible good fortune I've had in my life, and try to make a difference. And what became clearer and clearer is, despite being super successful at raising a lot of money, hundreds of millions of dollars for charity, when the economy turns, as generous as people want to be, they can't be. And so it's really important to create an environment within which the economy prospers, because then everything else is made possible. And that led me to the Ontario Chamber of Commerce, whose goal really is to help stimulate, create, and encourage the kind of dynamic economy that allows for us to generate the opportunities and pay for the social services and standard of living that we'd all love for ourselves, our family, and our community.
So tell me a little bit about the Ontario Chamber of Commerce. So I've attended Mississauga Board of Trade events. I've attended a lot of Toronto Board of Trade events. How does that fit in with the Ontario Chamber of Commerce?
Yeah, we're the umbrella group for 157 local chambers and boards of trade that vary from the Mississauga or Toronto Region Board of Trade, which are very large chambers, boards of trade, to Gananoque or Elliott Lake or Coboconk, which are obviously much smaller, very often not much in the way of full-time staff, maybe volunteer staff. And in addition, we have about 250 direct members at the OCC level, which are the larger organizations that do business across the entire province, and so can't just be members of the Toronto Region Board of Trade or Ottawa or Timmins. These are the banks, the car manufacturers, Hydro One, colleges and universities. And our goal and our principal work, because we're also part of a federation of Canadian chambers, so I have counterparts in each of the provinces across the country. But our focus at the OCC is principally working with Queen's Park and the local governments in Ontario to create the tax, regulatory, and policy environment within which business can thrive, and therefore society as a whole can thrive.
Are you political or are you nonpartisan?
We're nonpartisan. We work with all parties, all stripes of government. At the end of the day, we don't believe anyone has the monopoly on the truth. So great policy is generated when you've got interesting discussions and debates with different points of view, and try to get to the best answers that are going to help the most people.
But logically, typically a pro-business kind of attitude?
Well, we're always looking for a pro-business kind of attitude, but we really think too much is made of there's a business perspective and there's a community perspective. At the end of the day, there is only one community, and our members are your neighbors, are the people on our main streets, are the people that help to support the local hockey teams, the local charities in our towns and cities and villages. And so, we like to think that we're actually helping to make everyone's life better. And that's reflected in our membership, because it's not just businesses. We do have colleges, we do have universities, we have labor unions. as members of the chamber, because I think they all see that really the opportunity is to build an economy that's going to work for everyone.
The Board of Trades, the Chamber of Commerce's used to have a lot of events. I think you used to have a big economic event in Niagara on the Lake or somewhere. How's COVID impacted? Has it been a challenge not bringing people together and not raising that kind of money?
Oh, I mean, hugely. We've had to pivot. What's been interesting is that crisis also creates its own opportunities. I mean, for instance, when we started at the beginning of the pandemic, the OCC had 134 chambers and boards of trade as members. We now have 157. So a number of chambers and boards of trade which had not been members of the Ontario Chamber have come, because in crisis you seek to sort of circle the wagons, and we are most definitely stronger together. So that's been one positive from our standpoint. Two is that we've had to innovate. And so, for instance, we used to do an annual gala dinner celebrating the best of the best in Ontario business, our Ontario Business Achievement Awards. And because of the pandemic, we clearly couldn't have an in-person dinner. We turned that into basically a television program, a series of episodes of great stories of CEO of the Year, Lifetime Achievement, heroes of the pandemic, and worked with TLN Television to put it onto national television. And the last couple of years, it's actually generated over 200,000 viewers each year that we put it on. So we're actually going to continue with that in the virtual form as opposed to an in-person dinner. We're thrilled. We brought back the Ontario Economic Summit this year, not in Niagara. We had it in person in Toronto. It was incredibly well received, and looking forward to rebuilding those elements going forward.
That Ontario Economic Summit in the past was really an opportunity for a lot of business people to meet with, hear from, and interact with Queen's Park politicians that they would not normally have had an opportunity to. And those politicians tended to use the stage, the vehicle, to make some major pronouncements and use it as an opportunity to reach out to the business community. Is that still what's happening?
Very much the case. As I said, it's just that it happened in Toronto versus Niagara this year. And at the end of the day, there's only so much you can do on Zoom and Teams. Being able to, humans are social animals at the end of the day, and having that direct contact makes an enormous difference. So there was a real pent up desire to have it in person again, and I look forward to growing that event going forward.
Next week at U of T, the Monk School of Government, I'm going to, a session on regionalism and arguing, I think, that cities too often don't think about them as being part of regions. There seems to be a proliferation of different boards of trades and chambers of commerce, and sometimes it seems they're overlapping, and then there's Urban Land Institute, and then there's Build, and then there's this thing and that thing. How does one keep it all straight? And do you think that we should have more consolidation? The Toronto Region Board of Trade, I think, was trying to become a board of trade for the greater Toronto area, but then some of the local municipalities, Mississauga being one, didn't want that and wanted to have a separate board of trade. What's the case of regionalism versus just municipality by municipality?
Look, there are lots of issues that are really important to address on a systemic basis. And so you have overarching organizations to do that, but very often there are issues or values that can be better fulfilled by having a very particular and very local centric organization. So, for instance, one of the enormous values in our local chambers is the networking that people do with their peer business people or members of the community. And so if you tried to have a meeting that would bring everybody together, clearly you would not be able to have the richness of the conversations that you can have by having a breakfast meeting in Timmins that is going to have the mayor, council, the major employers, the local health authority. And if you tried to have that conversation just on a provincial basis, a lot of the issues that would be incredibly important to those individuals wouldn't necessarily make the agenda. So, as in all things, there's a balance to this, and it's crucial that each level demonstrate its value and focus on those things that, because of the specific level they're at, they're best able to bring to successful conclusion, and not, you can't be all things to all people, and that's why the particular rises.
Rocco, I'd like you to elevate for a second, if I could get you to do so, and talk about networking. You know, a lot of people, when they go into tough times, whether it be COVID or a recession, bad economic times, cut back on conferences, on networking opportunities, things that you're talking about in regards to interacting with other businesses, interacting with governments, et cetera. Other people say no. In challenging times, that's where opportunities abound, and you can buy companies, you can expand, you can market, et cetera. And so therefore, there's this sort of these two different points of view. Tough economic times, you should husband your resources, you should, batten down the hatches, and you should try to make it through the storm. And this other attitude being, no, frankly, that's the time when you've got to actually do more of it to make sure that you can grab those opportunities. What's your conclusion? What's your attitude?
Well, I think it's a little column A and a little column B, in the sense that what harder times force you to do is to ensure that whatever you're going to invest is having the biggest possible impact. There's a wonderful saying from that great management consultant guru, Peter Drucker, once said, there is nothing more inefficient than doing efficiently that which should never be done at all. And so it's really about ensuring that the activities that you are involved in, and all activities are going to require an expenditure of both your time and money. So make sure that whatever it is high value. I would argue that in tough times, you're absolutely right. There are opportunities to acquire. There are opportunities to merge. There are also opportunities to learn from others. One of the things that was particularly powerful during the pandemic around the networking, even though a lot of this had to be done virtually, was really sharing best practices. And we saw, for instance, early in the pandemic, some small alcohol producers turn from producing beer or spirits to doing to providing a disinfectant into the healthcare system. That you had people involved in various kinds of textiles, then suddenly producing masks. That you had auto parts manufacturers convert capabilities over to producing ventilators. So there is a quick way to learn from those best practices when you're interacting with your peers. And as the old saying goes, no one has ever cut themselves to greatness. If you're simply looking at husbanding the resources and not spending, that may be fair. You may be not spending on a few things that would have been wasted money, but you're also not spending on those things that are going to help you create opportunity.
I interviewed numerous different people at the beginning of the pandemic, and I agree with you. And they were, it was amazing how many people came up with interesting ideas, ways to pivot and some of them did it out of necessity because they knew that they would have financial challenges if they didn't. But so many of them because of different interactions, where someone from a hospital said they need something or other at a whatever event, and they said, I can actually do that. One of them was a large toy manufacturer that pivoted very quickly and started providing personal protective equipment. Rocco, off the top, you talked about the lack of labor, skilled labor particularly, but lack of labor. But at the same time, potentially in anticipation of a coming recession, we've seen huge layoffs in the tech industry. And just last week, Goldman Sachs and other big banks announced massive layoffs. And typically in a recession, one thinks of rising unemployment. What do you think about that? Is it and some people would think the tech sector sort of leads the economy, and tech is down something like 35% in the stock market last year. Banks had a terrible year, not banks, but investment banks had a terrible year last year from a deal standpoint. So maybe they're a leading indicator of where the market, the economy is going to be going. But what should companies be doing? Should companies be looking at layoffs today, or no, they should be thinking about your challenge in regards to lack of labor and keeping on those people that they've got?
Look, we're seeing everything. There are definitely specific sectors, but let's be clear on the technology side. Technology companies' employment is still significantly ahead of where it was prior to the pandemic. So even these last announcements, like from Amazon and so on, in some of their warehouses, where they maybe built a little too aggressively relative to where the market currently is and is going to be for the next 12 to 24 months, they're still way ahead of where they were before. And what the reality out in the market is that there's still order of magnitude almost 1 million positions in Canada that are going unfilled across a wide array of industries. And so those who are calling for recession, one of the real issues is this will be one of the most bizarre recessions on record, because the December numbers showed an additional 100,000 plus. So yes, puts and takes, some went down, some went up, but net, it went up. Now, I don't like the fact that a big chunk of the up over the last 2 years has actually been in government employees. I want to see more employment happening in the private sector, because quite frankly, at the end of the day, those are the people who pay the taxes that are then going to drive the ability of government to pay for those services. We don't generate long-term sustainable growth by just increasing government expenditure. That said, there are significant needs, and so if you can find great people, there is still, notwithstanding these announcements that you've talked about, there is still very much a war for talent out in the economy on a general basis.
We're chatting tonight with Rocco Rossi, the President and Chief Executive Officer of the Ontario Chamber of Commerce. We're going to take a break for some messages and come back in just 2 minutes with Rocco, and we're going to go through a couple of other issues that I think the Ontario economy is faced with, that Rocco has been posting and commenting on, and then we're going to end up with his talk a little bit about his pilgrimages in Europe. Stay with us, everyone. Fascinating conversation with one of the guys that's more plugged in the Ontario economy than anyone else I know. Stay with us, everybody. Welcome back, everyone, to the Brian Crombie Radio Hour on Saga 960. I got to tell you, there's a couple of people that you meet in corporate life, in political life, in community life that impress you. And Rocco Rossi is one of those guys that's always really impressed me. I had the privilege of following him closely during a mayoralty campaign numerous years ago when he was involved in politics. I had a personal reason why I was really interested in prostate research and prostate cancer issues that he was very involved with. And I've been involved in business my whole career. And so therefore, obviously, Rocco's role as head of the Ontario Chamber of Commerce is of great interest to me. But Rocco, I've always found that you don't shy away from controversial issues. You've always been one of those gentlemen that's been willing to stand up for what you believe in. And so I thank you for that. One of the things that you've been posting about lately is nuclear power. And I guess OPG is one of your members.
As is Bruce Power.
Some people think that nuclear power is bad, that nuclear waste is an issue. Other people would say the only reason why we were able to get off of coal in Ontario was because of the base load that nuclear power provides, and that's what's been able us to clean up our skies. Tell me, if you could, what your attitude is toward nuclear power, sir.
Well, I'm an enormous supporter, notwithstanding the waste issues, which always need innovation and improvement. If we're serious about getting to a low carbon economy, and we at the Ontario Chamber are not climate deniers. We fully believe that this is happening, that mankind is contributing to it, and that we need to work on a solution. As you say, without nuclear power, we could have never shut down the coal-fired plants in Ontario, being the first jurisdiction in North America to do so. And quite frankly, to this day, the single largest contribution we've made to GHG emission reduction in Canada, thanks to nuclear power. Over and above its impact on energy, nuclear reactors are also the source of medical isotopes that are used for sterilizing medical equipment across the globe, for diagnostic imaging, and for use in the fight against things like prostate cancer. So it is in many ways the gift that keeps on giving. And Ontario and in Canada are in an incredible position because we go right from uranium deposits to the engineering expertise required in this industry, and so we're in a position to truly be a global leader in it. So we think there are lots of positives. That's not to say that renewables and storage is not part of the solution as well. It absolutely is. But they absolutely are. But quite frankly, our energy needs are such that we cannot ignore any GHG-free option, and nuclear is a crucial part of that mix. I find too many people, they forget that ESG is 3 letters and not just one. And we have to understand that there are social and governance and also environmental consequences for all of the decisions that we take. People say, yeah, solar, great thing. Did you know that a significant portion of the solar panel equipment that's coming out of China is actually being produced through forced labor of Uyghurs in China? Or the fact that 80% of the cobalt mined in the world that goes into electric vehicle batteries currently is mined in the so-called Democratic Republic of the Congo, which is neither democratic nor a republic, and that has mining conditions that we would have been ashamed of in the 19th century, let alone the 21st century, where children are still mining cobalt. So don't feel all virtuous that I'm driving my Tesla and therefore saving the world. There are trade-offs everywhere. It's a matter of balancing. And quite frankly, I'd much rather have solutions that are generated in jurisdictions like ours that have much higher employment, environmental, social governance standards than many of the alternatives in the world. But that requires us to not allow visions of perfection to get in the way of the much better than the alternative.
You pointed out that we're refurbishing one of the nuclear plants in Ontario, but I think we're closing down one as well because it's deemed that it can't be refurbished. I interviewed an emergency room doctor at a hospital in Toronto who was at one point in time anti-nuclear and very pro-environmental issues, educated himself and became head of a consumer organization in support of nuclear. And he said that nuclear is the only solution to climate change. And he thought we should be investing in more nuclear. Where do you come out on this refurbish versus closure versus actually invest in growth in nuclear?
Well, I don't think it's the only answer, but I think it is a crucial part of the answer. I can't do the math around getting to GHG free in any kind of reasonable time frame without a significant role for nuclear. And thankfully, there is some additional investment being done right now in what are called small modular reactors. There's a pilot being built at Darlington currently by OPG. And that would allow for more investment and more use cases for nuclear. You could put these small modular reactors in more rural and remote, help with mining, with large employers, with the energy needs of communities in places that are more difficult to service. I'm absolutely a believer in that. On the refurbishment, I leave it to the technical and engineering experts to be able to determine what can be refurbished on a safe basis and what needs to be closed down because it truly has reached end of life use and you need an alternate. So that's the debate that's currently happening at the Pickering reactor, which currently represents about 16% of Ontario's electricity needs currently. That's not going to be easy to replace. So the lifespan's been extended a bit, but they're still talking about it being ultimately closed. Again, I leave that to the experts, but I am optimistic and encouraged by what is going on the small modular reactor front.
Let's change. Automotive industry has been critical to Ontario, southwestern Ontario, particularly over the course of frankly the last 50 years, I guess it is, since the auto pact back in the 1960s. We've had big announcements by GM of investments in Oshawa. I think there's some big electronic stuff being announced in Windsor. I think you posted just recently about some Canadian auto business, electronic vehicle, etc. What's your assessment of the future of the automotive industry in Ontario, and what, if anything, should we be doing?
Well, it is an enormous employer. It has a multiplier effect. It's not just about the cars themselves. It's car parts. It's all the people who service, help to finance the people along the way. So it is a key part of the environment. And the last 2 years has seen really generational level of investment by auto parts and auto manufacturers in Ontario to the tune of $16 billion, something we did not expect to see, and largely in the electric vehicle front, and largely being made because of the promise that Canada and Ontario represent to the world, that this is a place not just with great and talented labor, great education institutions to help with research and development, but also rich resources to enable those companies to be able to vertically integrate right back to the critical minerals that are required for things like electric vehicle batteries. And so in order for us to defend and build on those investments that have already been announced, we need to show that we can actually do the vertical integration, that we can provide more nickel and rare earths and lithium and copper for these investments to choose to come here as opposed to anywhere else in the world, because we're not exactly the low labor cost environment. So we've got to build that package of benefits, starting with the fact that currently, 94% of our electric grid is GHG free, which is a huge attraction to manufacturers. But as you get more manufacturing, you need more capacity. So how are you going to add GHG free electric capacity? That's going to require things like storage, and it's going to require communities to step up and speed up the processes to make decisions. Perfect example, Meaford, Ontario, TC Energy, formerly TransCanada Pipeline, is proposing a pump storage facility. This is going to use power in off-peak times to pump water from Georgian Bay up into a reservoir, and then in peak times, allow that water to come down through turbines, giving you GHG-free hydroelectric power, using nature's own battery storage, namely water. And yet, there are people saying, well, I don't want the noise, I don't want the construction. What happens with the long-term temperature of Georgian Bay if this water is going through turbines? Are we nearing a time when we're going to burn ourselves to a crisp on this planet or not? And if we are, and we do not deny the science, then we need not just one of these pump storage facilities, we're going to need dozens of them. If we're going to electrify our grid so that we can have electric vehicles instead of internal combustion engines, we're going to need a grid and electricity production that is 2 to 3 times what it is today. And so
hold it.
Yeah.
Grid electrical production 2 to 3 times what we have today? Seriously?
2 to 3 times what we have today, the more we want to electrify. Like, we've made amazing announcements like the production of green steel. Instead of using a coke furnace, coal-fired furnace in steel production, there is an option to use an arc-fired furnace, which is basically using electricity to heat the process. That requires massive amounts of electricity to pull off. Great for the environment, but that electricity's got to come from somewhere. It's got to be transmitted somehow, and that's going to require decisions by communities to move the processes along, to understand that there is no human activity, perhaps aside from thinking, that does not have an impact on the environment. And so again, we can't have this unattainable perfection goal. We have to understand that there's going to be puts and takes, and that net zero is not the same as zero. So there'll be pluses and minuses to get us to where we need to go. But that's going to require us to move beyond NIMBYism to being far more nimble and understanding that trade-offs are going to be required.
I agree with you completely. Rocco, you ran for politics. You're passionate about Toronto and in Ontario. I spoke with Joe Berridge, principal of urban strategies, and he said, Brian, we are the second largest financial center in North America. And within the next 5 to 10 years, we're going to be the third largest population area, metropolitan area, rivaling New York and Los Angeles, bigger than Chicago and anywhere else. And we're not acting. like we're that important, we're that big, that and we're not acting on a regional basis, and we're not realizing how important our metropolitan region is. Do you agree? What should we be doing?
I think we need to be more aspirational. We do have a phenomenal thing going here. Yes, we've got problems. Yes, there are valid criticisms of many things. But the bottom line is, there is a lineup of millions of people from around the world who still are prepared to vote with their feet and come here. And that should tell us something about how good that we have it. Now, you don't want to open it up willy-nilly because you don't want to destroy great things. But in order for us to be able to sustain and grow in an incredibly competitive world that is only going to get more competitive, we need to continue to bring in people from around the world. We will continue to grow. Let's do it intelligently. Let's make sure, for instance, that we do buy into greater density. One of the things that if I had hair, I'd be pulling it out, is everyone wants to have more housing. They want to protect the Greenbelt, rightfully so. They want to protect agricultural land. They want to reduce our GHG footprint. I agree with all of those.
But not here, not beside me.
But there is only one place where that Venn diagram comes together, and that is greater density in our towns and cities. If you don't grant that, then you doom yourself to eating up farmland and green space in this ever-ending search for more housing.
And then I interview an architect and an urban planner who say, Brian, once things are over like 5 or 9 stories, people don't see the height. They don't care about the height. But all the politicians and the planners at city government seem to worry about is how high it is. And they say, we effectively could build 10, 20% more homes by just adding some extra height. And no one
100%.
is negatively impacted. But yet that seems to be the
agree.
thing that NIMBYs and politicians and government planning people worry about the most. Anyway, we got to take a break. We're almost out of time. In 2 minutes, we're going to come back and we're going to talk about pilgrimages, because this is fascinating. Rocco Rossi, with everything else he's passionate about and is involved in, wants to go to Europe and trek. Stay with us, everybody.
Thank you.
Wow, welcome back. I've had a great chat this evening with Rocco Rossi. He is the president and chief executive officer of the Ontario Chamber of Commerce, and we've been covering the map of a whole bunch of different issues. But Rocco, I follow you on social media, and one of the things that really fascinates me is that you've been trekking in Europe, and you called it pilgrimages. Tell me, what's this all about? Sounds fascinating.
Well, since 2002, I have 15 times, in times ranging from 1 week to 1 month, done pilgrimage walks across Western Europe towards the Spanish town of Santiago de Compostela. And the first time I went was at one of the absolute low points of my life, where I was looking to sort through some very difficult questions. And what I've found is something that humans have found for millennia in multiple faiths, and that is the power of walking in nature and stillness, and being able to have that internal conversation with yourself and whatever divine entity you believe in or not, just with yourself. And the Camino de Santiago and its many variations have given me that opportunity and really are a reboot for my body and my soul, my mind, that I highly recommend to all.
Fantastic. I interviewed someone who said that you should have a plan ready to go, and the boots worked in such that if you lose a job or you lose a relationship, or you just need that kind of time away from something going on, rather than just dwelling in whatever it is that your issue is. Go and do what's it called? The
Camino de Santiago.
The Camino de Santiago. And sounds like it's a plan that I should go buy some boots and get them worked in.
I highly recommend it. It is oxygen for the soul.
Rocco Rossi, thank you so much. Really appreciate it.
Great pleasure.
That's our show for tonight, everybody. I remind you on every Monday through Friday at 6 o'clock on 960 AM. You can stream me online, even from downtown Toronto at saga960am.ca. Good night, everybody.